Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. This is our third taster session that we're doing about this partnership and how our joint experience hopefully can benefit you guys. So we're really glad to see you all here. Sorry, excuse me. Classic. I've just started and now I'm coughing. Just have a quick drink. Yeah, so great to see you all here. Looking forward to hearing questions and thoughts. We've got about 45 minutes, so I think the chat function is now open, so if you've got questions, put them in there and we'll do our best to sort of manage those towards the end of the session. So I'll kick off just with a quick introduction about myself, and then I'll kind of pass around our little virtual team room, if you like, of Henry, Cathy, Brian and Rosie, and then we'll go into kind of some of the detail on the slides. So my name's Davies. I'm Director of Supply Services at Value Match. So my experience is primarily in the public sector, in procurement, over many years in the NHS. Here at Value Match, I kind of work with suppliers in terms of trying to help them navigate kind of public sector landscape. I also cover social value and sustainability. So some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today is kind of falls within my remit in terms of how we can sort of baseline organisation sustainability journeys and things like that. So that's a little bit about me. Brian and Rosie are in my team. Brian is the technology guru, so he's going to be making sure all the slides work well and everything flows. And Rosie works in my team. She is junior sustainability consultant. So I'll hand over to you, Henry, just to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. Nice to be with you this afternoon. So my name's Henry Greenwood. I'm the founder and managing director of Green Schools Project, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my background and the background to Green Schools Project in a moment. And I'll pass over to Cathy.
Hi everybody. I'm Cathy. I work with Henry at Green Schools Project as the head of development. I'm really pleased to be here.
Perfect. Okie doke, Brian. I think we go to the next slide, please. So the partnership approach. So just to kind of give you a bit of a flavour, as I said, my background is kind of NHS public sector in that procurement space in terms of understanding kind of and navigating how suppliers do that better. Value Match was kind of born out of the director's experience in the public sector landscape. So we very much kind of cut across procurement, social value, sustainability, bid management and support. And as we've kind of developed and done more work with the education sector, we've developed our sustainable schools offering, which is what we're going to be talking to you a little bit about today, which is the partnership with Green Schools Project as well. So I'll pause there and I'll come on to a bit more detail about what Value Match do as we move through the slides. Henry?
Great, yeah. So Green Schools Project, as it says, was formed in 2015. I had been a secondary school maths teacher for 12 years up to that point. I had been I kind of developed a job role for myself in one of the schools and a sustainability coordinator, and worked with a group of students on a variety of environmental projects. And it was basically that experience that inspired me to start up an organisation which we called Green Schools Project, to help schools do something similar. When we started, we were supporting schools to set up and run eco teams and run environmental projects, and as the years went on, we were building some momentum. But I think around sort of 2018, 2019, it became clear to me that just a school setting up an eco team and running some projects with a small group of students just as an extracurricular activity wasn't enough. So that was where the idea behind Zero Carbon Schools came around, for a much more holistic programme, which involves pupils and staff, gets it into the curriculum, gets a bigger group of pupils working on it, and really kind of gets a whole school approach going. And we've been building and growing since then, up to the point where we have about 160 schools signed up to the programme this year, and we're working with schools all around the country on the programme, and Cathy will tell you a bit more about Zero Carbon Schools itself in a moment.
Brilliant. Next slide. Thanks, Brian. So I think just building on what Henry was saying there in terms of how it's sort of evolved in terms of Green Schools project, you know, from Henry's background and sort of passion for kind of wanting to convey that to the schools. It's a bit similar with Value Match in terms of our CEO David's really passionate about social value and sustainability, and so everything that we do at Value Match is very sort of purpose focus driven around kind of how do we embed social value, sustainability in all the things that we do. So in the sort of evolution of the procurement work we've done with schools and the education sector, some I think of the schools might even be on this call, you know, we've really been trying to work through the kind of operational procurement kind of issues and projects and processes that they've got to, you know, bed in and deliver that social value and that sustainability aspect. So almost trying to create that ecosystem of, you know, the school understanding where they're at and what their baseline is, what they need to do, what their requirements are, you know, for the DfE climate change strategy, and then equally kind of, you know, actually putting that into practice, working with like-minded suppliers with similar values, and then delivering this sort of sustainability and social value. So it's that sort of ecosystem kind of, you know, procurement being used as that positive lever. So I think that is kind of core to our organisational kind of values in terms of that delivering social value and sustainability. We've got a lot of well-established relationships with schools built over several years, and we kind of feel like the Green Schools project offering is really complementary to our services, as we're sort of focused on that operational procurement, sort of creating value, not just monetary, but also kind of value in terms of putting sustainable contracts in place and you know, social value in terms of maybe putting apprenticeships in place and things like that. And then Green Schools kind of doing that with the pupil kind of education piece as well. So we see it as quite sort of complementary. And later on in the slides, we've got some snippets from Paul Edmonds, who's the CEO of Heart Academy, someone that we've both worked with across different projects, kind of explaining sort of the work we do separately and then why the partnerships come together and sort of some of his kind of thoughts on that. So I think the other things to just call out is that we're really excited about this partnership because we think it's got real growth potential in it, and it's also, we're trying to recognise that schools and MATs are you know, perhaps resource limited, so trying to collaborate in partnerships like this creates you know, kind of a double whammy in some respects, in terms of you're getting kind of two things in the same sort of basket, so it's not kind of having to do separate different projects, it's kind of linked and aligned, so it helps schools potentially get to where they want to be quicker, or get to that baseline of sustainability quicker, and then work out what they need to do. Thanks, Brian. Next slide.
Hi, I think this is me. So yeah. Just talking through a little bit about about what Green Schools project is bringing to this partnership, and as Laura said, I think they are such complementary kind of offers that kind of creates a bit of a one-stop shop for schools and academies that want to tackle the kind of infrastructure element of sustainability, but also want to involve young people to come on that journey with them. So our flagship program is called Zero Carbon Schools. It's a package of pupil sessions, resources, and teacher support that schools can take part in. It covers the majority of the school year. So most schools start it in November. There is an option to start it in January, running to the end of the summer term. There's 4 key stages to the project. So first of all, young people explore climate change, what is a carbon emission, what are fossil fuels, etc. Then they investigate their own school's carbon footprint. So that's through collecting data on energy, food, transport, and purchasing. From that, the young people do some calculations and things around that, but they then decide on action projects that they design and lead in teams with their classmates and with their teachers to tackle one or more of those areas to reduce their emissions. That's the ACT stage, which is the kind of meat of the program. And then the 4th stage is called Inspire, which is where they take everything that they've learned and everything that they've done, and they share that with their wider community. So if that's families, other pupils at school, and also the community outside of the school gates. It has really, really good feedback. So 98% of teachers would recommend it to others. We have lots and lots of schools doing it year on year, which I think shows that it's really delivering impact in schools. And a new cohort of children will come through each year. to carry on the work of the previous cohort. So that's Zero Carbon Schools in a nutshell. I think it's really, really complementary to what Value Maps are offering. And yeah, really excited to bring this together for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Cathy. Next slide, please, Brian. So the next few slides are just kind of, I think, building on what Cathy said there in terms of what that project actually does in terms of the, in schools kind of approach, doing the projects and the pupils carrying them out and really getting to grips with it. I think it's born out of the fact that kind of the pressure on sustainability practices, the DfE climate strategy is really kind of setting out how schools need to focus on this area. So that increasing pressure for sustainability, I think, is kind of, we're all kind of trying to work out how we can do more, how we can do it differently. And that's kind of why we're trying to talk to you today around kind of what we both offer and how we're offering it together, so that you can kind of understand and see if that works for you guys and see if we can help you, because that ultimately we just want to try and support schools to go on a journey to sort of understand, what they need to do. I think the DfE sustainability and climate change strategy has a lot of areas and focuses, but I think a lot of them around sort of on the slide here, developing green skills and careers and community, decarbonising estates, and kind of driving that through sort of the infrastructure and the supply chains and the internal operations. I think some of the immediate priorities are around kind of having the sustainability leads and the climate action plans in place this year. Reducing single-use products and minimising waste and sort of procuring food from lower carbon sources. I think, these on the screen are kind of the key areas. And I think what Value Match's sort of part of this puzzle does is the Sustainable Schools Assessment, which kind of baselines where you are as an organisation across kind of 6 key areas, which are some of the ones that are on the slide. So it's really sort of the starting point of the partnership is to kind of do that assessment and then kind of go, right, where are we? What can we do? What are we doing really well? What do we need to learn and develop on? And then perhaps some of those things that are identified are things that then go into the Green Schools project and our projects then that the children learn and kind of embed and sort of promote through the school. So it's kind of one's complementing the other, and that's why we see our sort of operational expertise really helping with the sort of pupil education piece and how they sort of complement each other really well. Next slide, please, Brian. So I think that this is just touching on sort of our vision, I think, for sustainable schools. So I think, schools are sort of almost like we've called it almost like a critical junction. So there's sort of, lots of different areas and priorities are converging in a school. So, you've got lots of kind of different goals. You've got people in different groups and communities converging. You've kind of, schools own a lot of land. So there's estates. And there's things that can be done there in terms of, improving community welfare, environmental and climate resilience. And then obviously you're equipping the future generation with skills and values to try and, take forward, I guess, all the things we're learning and trying to embed about being better about sustainability and social value and kind of, take that forward and lead the charge, because it is obviously a critical area. So I think the DfE climate change strategy, climate change strategy is, it's a big document. It's about 40 or 50 pages. So, and I'm sure a lot of you have read it in detail. But I think, the priorities are around that kind of the climate action plan, that kind of leadership of sustainability within a school to kind of bring it to life and bring it to the forefront. And that's kind of what we're trying to sort of represent by our Sustainable Schools Assessment. So that's the kind of vision for it. So in terms of kind of how we see it fitting together. And then what our assessment actually does is we have a model that sits behind it, which essentially baselines an organisation. So it looks at environmental management, human rights, diversity, equality, inclusion, resource use, circular economy, and sort of health and well-being. And it kind of looks at the picture across all those areas within an organisation, whether it be a school or a different, a supplier, for example. And then we baseline that and kind of go, okay, you're sort of maybe more mature in this area and maybe less mature in other areas. And then we sort of kind of, we create a plan then of sort of, this is your baseline and these are the things you need to work on, or this is the journey that you might need to go on to kind of address some of the gaps that you may have, but equally, promote some of the really good practices that are being done as well. So I think the purpose of kind of joining with Green Schools is that if you do that piece first, you kind of get that roadmap, you get that baseline, and you can move forward from that point. It's a really iterative, collaborative process. So we work with the schools, just in the way that, Cathy was describing then how Green Schools Project really interact with the students, and it's a curriculum piece. The same, we want to work with perhaps not the students, but ultimately the operational team in the school, and kind of really get a picture of kind of what you're doing and understand your sustainability baseline, so that we can then put practical things in place to sort of help and support, and then that that leads into sort of the climate education piece with the kids as well. So that's kind of a little bit about our model. I'm happy to take any more questions on it if we have them, and share any more detail, but that's kind of just a flavour of it. Next slide, please. This slide is it's probably a bit procurementy, but we are procurement, so I suppose it's right to sort of call that out. I think it's just an observation, the point I made earlier about sort of like the ecosystem piece. So what we're trying to do is kind of fit everything together to work cohesively. So we're not trying to do sort of isolated pieces of work. We're trying to sort of create a sort of a really good processing ecosystem that all sits and works together and interacts smoothly. So kind of what we buy, how we buy in schools, in anything, and kind of and the sort of who we buy from is all very relevant here. So, if we're not buying from kind of ethical and sustainable sources, then we're not kind of internally promoting the right practices and things as well. So I think it's just to call out that everything is interlinked. What you buy in a school, even if it's a pencil, or is it a piece of food, or is it plastic, whatever it is, there's a carbon footprint, there's an impact, and I think we need to just kind of, what we're trying to say is that we need to be more joined up in that process of how we buy, what we buy, who we buy from, and then also promote that understanding within the children in the school as well, so they understand the knock-on effects and the carbon footprints of everything. So that's just what that slide is for, just to sort of, I guess, remind us that it's we can't do things in isolation. Henry, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I think you had a good
I just think this is a situation where just to kind of highlight how the two things work together very well. So obviously procurement, purchasing in a school would normally kind of go on behind closed doors as far as the pupils are concerned. These kind of decisions are made and things turn up in the school or in the classroom, and pupils aren't really involved with those kind of decisions and don't really know what happens. What Laura's just mentioned about how everything that the school buys has a carbon footprint, that's explored in the pupil investigate sessions. So when the pupils do the investigate sessions, as Cathy mentioned, there's 4 areas that they look at. They look at energy, food, travel, and purchasing. Procurement kind of comes under the same thing. I remember teaching, running a session with a year 8 pupil who was just kind of blown away by the idea that everything has a carbon footprint. He was like, what, even this pen, even this pencil, even that book, and he'd never really kind of considered that before. So it's actually just bringing that learning to life for the pupils, and then if they decide to run their projects on that, they can they can look at where they can actually reduce the purchasing of the school, maybe buy things that are more durable rather than kind of easily breakable and has to be kind of replaced every 6 months or so. They might focus on reducing single-use plastic. They might put on a swap event where people can kind of bring things in and swap them over to encourage reusing. They might look at the printing of the school and try to reduce that. So there's lots of areas where the pupils can actually learn from this process and then kind of feed into it as well.
Perfect, thank you. Next slide, please, Brian. The hand over to Cathy or Henry, for this bit.
So this is just to kind of highlight a little bit about how the two programs work together, and you're going to hear from a few kind of clips from Paul Edmund, who's the Chief Financial Officer for Heart Academies Trust, who was actually the person who introduced Value Match and Green Schools Project in the first instance, because they were doing the two things separately, and really saw the opportunity to kind of bring them both together. So Shackleton Primary School is one of the Heart Academy Trust schools. And it's just a little case study that we've put together. So they started the program a couple of years ago. They've run it twice now. So the pupils have gone through. So there's well, they're about to start the program for the third time this academic year in November. So it will they run the sessions with year 4, and so this will be the third kind of group of pupils. In fact, it said they year 5. I think they switched it to year 4 after this. But yeah, so there'll be a number of pupils who have gone through the program. So they've gone through the explore stage where they've learnt about the climate crisis. They've investigated their carbon footprint. The year that this focuses on, the classes decided to work on travel as their area of carbon emissions. They developed a green pledge which pupils and their parents kind of signed up to try to encourage sustainable travel, and they also put on, which was a lovely idea, a kind of a poetry competition which brought kind of which encouraged sustainable travel. And so that's just an example of where the program kind of goes into various different curriculum areas. You know, climate change is often seen as something that is done in geography or science, but actually there's lots of other areas where it can feed into. So in this case, like they did a really nice English activity, which builds their literacy skills. They're also in the Inspire stage towards the end. I think this is on the next slide, Brian. In the Inspire stage, they also there's a little kind of framed activity, scaffolded activity within the session resources about contacting a local decision maker. So they either the local council or their MP. So the pupils also wrote to their local MP. I think there's the kind of letters or postcards that they're holding up in the photo, to talk about what they had done, what they had achieved at the school, how they'd raised awareness about it, and then asking the MP to kind of give his support to their projects as well. It all culminated in a really nice celebration event where we brought the schools from the Heart Trust together, so they could share their projects with other schools and get ideas and kind of share it across the trust. So it was a really nice way of the trust kind of coming together to celebrate what they'd done over the course of the year.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Henry. Next slide. So just to build on Henry's case study there, this is a case study from our perspective, just to give a flavour of sort of some of the sort of kind of I guess procurement related activities that have happened in schools. So I won't read all the detail out because obviously there's a lot on there, but just simple things like, you know, look at the fact that 4 million children go to school on an empty stomach or have inconsistent access to meals at home. You know, so you think that you look at it as a staggering figure and you just think, you know, how can you help? And so this is just a case study around kind of some of the processes and systems that we kind of put in place and amendments and changes that we made through a procurement process that, you know, really sort of streamlined and enhanced that. So, you know, an online ordering system, so there was better visibility of tracking and managing stock to make sure that nutritious meals were then supplied on a daily basis and they were balanced. You know, kind of creating apprenticeships through the opportunity, you know, enhancing the education investment through collaborating with suppliers. So again, the point around, you know, working with the right suppliers who have the same values helps this process greatly. And, you know, sort of getting children in, these are the kind of projects you can get the children, you know, involved in. Food is emotive and engaging, you know, and so asking the children to kind of, you know, put their kind of opinions forward and look at things in different ways, you know, again building on that education piece of kind of, you know, sustainability isn't this sort of thing that we can't touch or we can't see. It is quite tangible when you kind of put it in the context of you know, something like catering within schools and things like that. So I mean, we've got a raft of kind of other case studies and examples of things that we've done with Heart Academies, but this just is just quite a good one in terms of kind of just the sort of the benefits that came from that, just to kind of draw those out. And I think we're going to come on to now, if we can go on to the next slide, Brian, just a couple of snippets from Paul. So the first one is, I guess, Paul just talk a little bit about the partnership and kind of work with Value Match. Thanks, Brian.
My name is Paul Edmund. I'm the Chief Finance Officer at Heart Academies Trust, and we have worked with Value Match and think now coming up for 2-3 years. And really, the purpose behind it was, there's a few aims behind it. One was to make sure our procurement was compliant. As a growing trust, we want to make sure we're doing all the right things and adhering to all the right rules and regulations. But more so, we really wanted to make sure that as we develop new contracts with new suppliers, those suppliers are more aligned to what we want to achieve in terms of our aims and values. And where Value Match add an awful lot of both experience, I think, and know-how is about driving sustainability and social value in those contracts. And that's all about what we want to do. So we want good value for our schools. We want to save them money, but we want more from our suppliers and our partnerships that ultimately provide the outcomes that over the long term we want to achieve, whether it's in our carbon footprint, whether it's supporting careers, whether it's supporting the student and child experience in the school. So a much broader, I suppose, richer relationship with our suppliers. And I think that's the work Value Match have been really, really good at. And it's a long-term, it's a long-term project. And I'd say we're a few years in and we've probably got a few years to go yet. But what we are finding is we're now working with suppliers who are offering an awful lot more to our schools than they would have done traditionally. So I think that's where Value Match has really added so much value to us. And hopefully as this develops, we'll build long term a nice ecosystem of suppliers and partners who are all really, really interested and bought in to the aims of Heart.
And then the next slide, Paul is just going to talk a little bit about kind of his experience with Green Schools Project.
It is. I mean, Green Schools Project has been brilliant, actually working with children across a number of our schools. And not just with children, actually, their programme works with children and with teachers. It's very much focused on sustainability and climate action in schools. It's adding an enrichment to the existing curriculum in terms of the work they do and the projects they run with the children. And those projects range from energy to waste management to catering, all those different elements that I suppose form your sustainability and your climate action plan. Green Schools are working with the children to engage them in that process, as well as obviously offering lots of education to them. But the benefit of working with Green Schools as well is they work with the teachers and they work with the schools, so they're offering a lot of CPD and support to the staff that are in the schools, so they feel more equipped and able to support the children and support the programme that's going on. So slowly building up a culture, helping us to build up a culture of sustainability across all our schools and across the trust.
And then the next slide is just Paul sort of explaining around kind of why bringing this partnership together is sort of connecting procurement and relationships and sort of really driving that sort of climate impact, connecting those dots, so to speak.
Well, I think we're all working towards the same aim, and that's, I suppose, changing how our schools work. Green Schools Project bring a very action-orientated, how to measure your carbon footprint and actions that the children and young people in our schools can get involved with to try and reduce our carbon footprint, but also better understand our carbon footprint and really what drives it. Value Match are working with all the suppliers that are, I suppose, in one way or another making up that carbon footprint, and we're working with Value Match again to understand the data, but understand what's driving it and how we can work with those suppliers to reduce it down more and more. So joining those dots, if we can build that partnership between Value Match and Green Schools Project, and Value Match and our other suppliers, and Green Schools Project and our other suppliers, we are building a culture, I think, that everybody we work with and all those partners we work with are all working towards the same goal. And I think then if Value Match can support Greener Schools project, whether that's with data or understanding procurement and understanding what we buy and understanding perhaps how we use it and how we dispose of it, and Green Schools project again can then feed into how we engage with some of those suppliers. I think you're starting to build really interesting relationships.
Brilliant, thank you, Brian. So next slide. So yeah, we just thought it'd be interesting to hear from Paul. Obviously, he wasn't able to join us today, but ultimately, you've seen some snippets there in terms of his perspective on kind of the sort of different aspects of our services and why it's kind of or why he thinks it's sort of beneficial to work together. And so this slide is just a bit of a recap, really, in terms of kind of what we're talking about or what we've tried to summarise. So I think, you know, by accessing our joint service, these are all the kind of benefits that you have access to. So ultimately, I talked about our sustainable skills assessment, so getting that baseline of your journey and kind of, you know, as a starting point of where you need to get to. And also, I think some of that will enable you to create a clear climate action plan. And obviously that deadline of the end of, you know, 2025 is looming. So, you know, everyone will be in different states of kind of where, you know, where that is up to and what they're doing. And clearly it has to be proportionate to the size of school and or multi-academy trust and things that are there. And then obviously Henry will touch on the other points, but I think it's just to say that there's a lot of kind of experience around kind of the operational side of things and then the kind of school kind of CPD teacher, you know, impact with the children and kind of, you know, from Green Schools. So it's a really sort of rounded offering and hopefully we've tried to convey that here. But then obviously if you have other questions, please feel free to come on. But Henry, if you just want to add to kind of your elements of the joint service, that would be great.
Yeah, Cathy, did you have anything to add first?
No, I mean, I think we've obviously given everybody a lot of information, which may take some time to sort of to absorb. But I think it, you know, in a nutshell, we're trying to sort of approach sustainability within a school from, you know, from sort of both ends and the middle, by, you know, engaging the operations with the procurement and all of that kind of infrastructure stuff that is really important. But as Henry said earlier, often happens kind of behind closed doors. Equally, the sort of pupil sessions may not be, you know, the stuff that the young people are learning about may not translate always to the adults that are making decisions. So I think this is a really good way of making sure that those two bits of the puzzle are coming together.
Yeah, and I just briefly to add to that, the word that sticks out for me, and it's come out in conversations with Paul previously, is about culture, and it's the culture of the trust or the school that he is trying to encourage through coming at it from these two different angles. Like, I think, you know, both of these things could happen in isolation, but actually if they happen within the same school or across the whole trust, then it really kind of it's kind of mutually reinforcing and encourages kind of, yeah, like positive outcomes on both sides of things. So Paul's been really keen to kind of, yeah, use this to kind of really drive a culture of sustainability across the trust.
Yeah, perfect. Next slide, please, Brian. Okay. So yeah, that was the last slide. So we've got our contact details here, and obviously we'll circulate these slides after the session as well, so you've got them to kind of reflect on, because as Cathy said quite rightly, there is a lot of information in there and you might be kind of thinking, how do we approach it? So I think reach out to us. We're happy to have kind of one-to-one sessions and follow-ups and stuff to explain kind of the practicalities of how it might work and sort of the timescales and costs and things associated with it. So happy to have those more detailed conversations after this session. We were just really trying to summarize kind of, you know, what it is, drive the interest, give you some kind of, you know, real life case studies of where it's worked really well and that it can work well. And then we can, you know, hopefully build on that with some of the colleagues that are on the call, and hopefully kind of, you know, develop some new relationships. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions. I haven't looked at the chat for a minute because I've been focused on what we've been doing, but are there any questions? So I'm just going to have a look.
Hi, Laura.
Oh, hi, Brian.
I have a question from Isabel.
Yeah.
Is sustainable travel also included in the strategy, the way pupils travel to school?
So I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question, but I think in terms of, if I answer it from the sort of sustainable schools kind of looking at everything, then I suppose we can look at kind of all aspects of kind of social value sustainability that impacts our school. Because I know that's a tricky one, because obviously you've got people walking, you've got people driving, you've got people busing, and trying to navigate the carbon footprint there can be quite challenging. Henry, I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the 4 topics that's covered in the Zero Carbon Schools programme. It's quite a popular one for pupils to work on. Pupil projects around that include things like sort of awareness around it, holding walk to school days or weeks, encouraging having cycling training. There's stuff that staff can do around kind of like bike to work schemes and that kind of thing as well. So it's certainly something that's covered within the Zero Carbon Schools.
Brilliant, thank you.
Just to add to that, I'm just putting in a link in the chat about one of our Bristol schools focused on sort of active travel and emissions around emissions, but also pollution and stuff around travel, and set up a bike bus, so which was featured on ITV News. So there's all sorts of kind of creative and crazy ideas that come out of the pupil projects, which is what's so wonderful about letting them lead.
Perfect, thank you, thanks both, that's brilliant. Hopefully that's answered your question. Any other questions or things people wanted to ask? As I said, conscious it is a lot of information. So, if you want to have a kind of more, if you want to digest when the slides come around and then organise a one-to-one with like us and Cathy and Henry, we're absolutely happy to do that. So yeah, don't feel like you need to ask all your questions now. It's completely fine to digest and think again. Checking, get something else coming. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we're doing all right for time.
I wonder, Laura, I think, is it that people's microphones aren't, I mean, obviously the chat is open, but I'm not sure if people's microphones are automatically.
Brian, I don't know if we can we unmute people just in case they want to? Don't worry if it's not doable.
I think Cathy and Henry will now have to unmute themselves, but everyone has the capability to unmute and turn on cameras. Sorry, Henry. Sorry, Cathy.
Thank you.
It's fine. I've said enough.
So just with that in mind, has anybody got anything else they wanted to add or ask? Okay, that's absolutely fine. So what I will do is, after this session, thanks for attending. Really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and hopefully you found that useful. I will circulate the slides and obviously copy Cathy and Henry in, and we'll also look to ask for a bit of feedback, I think, on the session as well, just to get your take on how you found it, because that will really help us get some feedback as well in terms of how you found the session and if you found it useful. So that would be great. So we'd appreciate if you can just answer a couple of questions. It won't be too difficult to do or too long. And yeah, we look forward to kind of touching base with you if you're interested in kind of discussing more with us. But I think with that in mind, we'll close the session and say thank you for attending. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.